In yesterday's video, I covered a couple big ranking changes, so I knew that this was the perfect time to just unveil the updated top 69 rankings for 2025 fantasy football. So just make sure to go down there, drop a like on this video, and subscribe to the channel to show your support. And again, if you have not heard, I'm closing in on 20,000 subscribers thanks to you guys because you guys are awesome. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give away 5 free Fantasy Football Roundup hats, which are new, by the way, brand new, legendary Fantasy Football Roundup hats. You will be the first 5 people to get them. I don't even have one. So to qualify to go get one, you have to go down there, drop a like on this video, be subscribed to this channel, and give me your hottest take for 2025 fantasy football. So go down there, drop a like, subscribe, and give me your hottest take for a chance to win a free Fantasy Football Roundup hat. Now, getting into our first tier, I don't want to spend too much time on this tier alone because nothing has changed. Like, this is still the group of guys that I believe have the ability to finish as the #1 overall player in fantasy football. Jamar Chase, CeeDee Lamb, Bijan Robinson, Saquon Barkley, Jahmyr Gibbs. Nothing has changed. Obviously, Jamar Chase has been here all offseason. Nothing has changed. CeeDee Lamb, I still just prefer over Bijan, Saquon, Jahmyr Gibbs because I see more likelihood of him finishing as the wide receiver 1 that I do with one of these 3 running backs. And I know one of them has to do it, or maybe it's somebody else. I just have a little bit of lack of trust with Bijan Robinson and Saquon because I've done research with running backs who have had 350 plus touches and what the following season brings them. And both of these guys had 350 plus touch seasons last year, and it's usually not good history. You either get injured or you lose volume. So I don't particularly love either of the running backs that are going in the top 2. But I do think that they have a better chance of doing it than Jahmyr Gibbs. Not that Gibbs doesn't have a great shot at doing it, though. I think Gibbs could easily be this type of guy right here who does finish as the #1 overall back. But again, there's no reason to really spend too much time on this one because as we will go through in the next tier, you're going to see some ranking changes and some in parentheses that'll either have a plus or minus sign that will indicate how much to you they moved up or down my rankings. And as you can see, this first tier was not touched because I really do feel like this top 5 group of guys is pretty much set in stone in my rankings at this point. Now, dropping down to our next tier, this is the tier of guys that I think have top 3 overall finish at their fantasy position right here. So Josh Jacobs, I continue to be well over consensus on, and I feel like I have to explain it every time because it's so out of the norm, but at the same time, I don't get why people don't see this one. Josh Jacobs is a workhorse running back for the Green Bay Packers, a good offense behind a good offensive line with a great offensive-minded head coach and a really good quarterback. I don't understand why people don't see that and want to jump on that type of player because at this point, there's no clear backup in Green Bay. I mean, they want it to be Marshawn Lloyd, but he keeps getting hurt every time he steps on a football field. So Josh Jacobs, I don't get why people aren't on the same page with me on this one, but this is why you come to this video right here because you know that you're not going to just get copy and paste rankings over on my channel, and that's why you see Josh Jacobs at 6. Christian McCaffrey, I ended up moving him up a spot just because of my risky nature. That is the way I live life, play fantasy football. I like to take risks on big upside players. And of course, like I said, the tier above him is the tier of guys that I think have top overall upside. And obviously, Christian McCaffrey has that. But this ranking of Christian McCaffrey has steadily reflected my comfortability levels with taking McCaffrey. I think McCaffrey is a worthy pick for exactly where you're getting him at in drafts, the 6 or 7 overall pick. But I do think that Christian McCaffrey is obviously the riskiest player in all of fantasy drafts this year. With Amon-Ra St. Brown, he ended up moving down because McCaffrey moved up. And again, it's all about comfortability versus risk and reward. With Amon-Ra St. Brown, I don't see that #1 upside. That doesn't mean he doesn't have top 3, though, because Amon-Ra St. Brown is pretty consistently, actually, lately, a top 3 wide receiver in fantasy. I still see a really good finish for Amon-Ra St. Brown. I just don't see that high-level upside with McCaffrey, so I just kind of had to make the decision to myself of, do I want to take the upside swing, or do I want to make sure I always have a shot to win if it doesn't work out? With McCaffrey, I know I have a realistic shot to blow the water out of the league, and with Amon-Ra St. Brown, I know I have a shot to win the league, just not as big. Now at number 9 and 10 with Justin Jefferson and Puka Nacua, these guys haven't moved either. JJ ended up flipping over Puka just because of the Matt Stafford injury on my latest wide receiver rankings. And again, I covered that in the wide receiver rankings. I think Justin Jefferson is always going to be good in fantasy. Everybody knows I don't like JJ McCarthy though. I think that it's really hard for me to see him having this really good level of upside for himself as a fantasy quarterback and his players in fantasy football pass catching wise, because I just don't see him being able to fit in this high volume passing offense that Kevin O'Connell wants to run. But that being said, Justin Jefferson demands a great target share, and he will get that. And the reason I think Puka is scary is because of this Matt Stafford injury. Now, it's been a good week. He's been practicing. That is always a good sign because we need him to be out there for him to fulfill a top 10 ceiling for a guy like Puka Nacua, or a top 3 ceiling at his respective position. But I do think that Puka Nacua is definitely a little bit risky at this point, probably a little riskier than Justin Jefferson. And I do think that Puka's ceiling is still a little bit higher than JJ's this year, but that's no slight to Justin Jefferson once again. Ashton Jeanty at 11 and Jeanty and Achane are both at 11 and 12 still. Now, we'll get to Achane here in a minute because obviously there's been a lot of news around him this week. But with Ashton Jeanty, like I always say, this is just a similar bet to the bet I made in Najee Harris's rookie year, which is what he wasn't on a great offense. And number 2, he's just not a player that I think is going to be running behind a great offensive line. So I think that he'll be really inefficient this year, like Najee was in his rookie year. But I also think he'll get peppered with carries, peppered with targets, and he'll have 350 plus opportunities right out of the gate. That's what makes him a top 12 player this year in fantasy to me, because he's going to be getting touches out the wazoo. I mean, it's going to be absolutely nuts for Ashton Jeanty this year. And I do prefer him for certain now over Jeanty and Achane because of the Achane injury. Now, if you haven't heard, Jeanty and Achane did suffer, I believe it was a calf injury, and he is not going to be practicing with his team for basically the foreseeable future. I mean, there has been doubt raised at this point about his week 1 availability, which of course will definitely hurt if he is out in week 1. My thought on this is this. I don't believe that I can realistically be honest with myself and rank him in the next tier, because I do believe that with a healthy Achane, he does have top 3 upside. Now, the question has always been health with Achane, but at the same time, I do believe that Achane will be able to move past it if they're careful with this, and it seems like they are taking a cautious approach. So I do want to maintain him in this tier here because I just know that the upside when he plays is ridiculously high. Now, dropping down to our next tier right here, these are the group of guys that I think have top 5 upside at their respective positions. I've got Nico Collins at 13, didn't move, Derrick Henry at 14, and Malik Neighbors at 15. So with Nico, obviously he's the wide receiver 1 in Houston, high passing volume offense. This is going to be a guy who, when healthy, is going to get you close to 15, 16 fantasy points per game. Basically what he's been doing. And I do think that health is obviously the determining factor for me in not having him in that next tier above. Because I do see him as a guy who probably misses a couple games because that's been par for the course for his entire career. With Derrick Henry, he did move up a couple spots in my rankings right here because this is mostly a distrust of others in this tier. Like with Malik Neighbors, this toe injury has been a problem. Not just the toe injury, it's been a shoulder injury here and there. I mean, the guy has been in and out of practice all training camp, and he's basically missed a big chunk of training camp. Not that he needs to learn the offense, not that he needs time to get integrated to the system, but he is dealing with a new quarterback this year. So we do have to take that into account with Malik Neighbors. That's why Henry rose above him. And I actually flipped Kyren and Henry in my own running back rankings. So Kyren dropped a spot as well. Because of the fact that I just believe with Derrick Henry, there's less question marks that I have with him than I do with Malik Neighbors. And with Kyren, he does also fit that 350 plus research. And it's not that I don't trust him and I think he's going to get injured particularly, but I do believe that just the size disadvantage will end up hurting him, particularly if they try to give him more touches on a per game basis, which is exactly when those 350 plus touch backs get hurt the next year, when they increase their touches per game. But at the same time, I do still see the scenario where Derrick Henry has the bad year this year. I mean, he's at an age where it is critical to acknowledge at least the age factor. And that's one thing it's incredible that people don't want to acknowledge for some reason with Henry. But I still obviously trust him. I do see no cause for concern based on his play last year. I just worry about the future and when we will get hit with that cliff, because it will happen at some point. Make no mistake about it. Chase Brown at 17, Brian Thomas Jr. at 18. With Chase Brown here, I think that he's an elite upside player. The only thing that worries me is the fact that his third down running situation is very curious right now. He's got Taj Brooks. Samaje Perine is a threat. I mean, these are two running backs that they have shown an affinity for in the past, and it makes me wonder if they really do believe in Chase Brown as a full 3-down back. Nevertheless, though, it's on one of the best offenses in football, one of the highest upside offenses in football. Chase Brown has to be at 17. And with Brian Thomas Jr., this is just a player that I believe is great, but I do believe that he won't see the target increase that we would have wanted for him if he was the only wide receiver one in that building. Like it or not, Travis Hunter will get work, and he will get a lot of work, by the way, because when push comes to shove, they drafted him to be a wide receiver. That's the bottom line. But I do believe that Brian Thomas Jr.'s bottom line from last year, for example, won't be affected. I just don't think we'll see the increase in work like we would have expected before they drafted Travis Hunter, which leaves him right around where he was last year, maybe a little bit better off. Brock Bowers at 19, I think, is just a great tight end swing. Like, I don't see a way this doesn't really work out unless he gets hurt. Now, I understand that there's been some concern and some chatter in the community about his usage in the preseason and Michael Mayer's usage. I'm not particularly worried about it. Like, the guy is just so dominant as a pass catcher. So even if they're in obvious passing situations and he's out there, it won't make much of a difference because we know that Brock Bowers is an elite target, and they have nobody else aside from Jacoby Myers that's really a legitimate threat. So Brock Bowers, to me, I just don't see this one not working. And with Jonathan Taylor to round out this tier here, I do think that there's going to be games with Jonathan Taylor where he will disappear, but I will say the Daniel Jones move is a big one for him. I do believe that his targets would have been way more affected if it were Anthony Richardson than they will be with Daniel Jones at quarterback. I also think his red zone usage will be increased with Daniel Jones than it would have been with Anthony Richardson. So I think that Jonathan Taylor had a big W with this Anthony Richardson benching because he will not have red zone work sharked from him by Anthony Richardson, and he will not lose tremendous amounts of targets. Dropping now to our next tier right here, I've got Drake London at 21, and then our two quarterbacks, Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson. They both rose up a spot. With Drake London, I think that this is just a player you can expect to get a massive target share on this Atlanta offense with a quarterback upgrade who has been in that offensive system for a full offseason now. I expect an increase in Penix's play. And I also expect Drake London to continue to be a really good wide receiver one for Atlanta, and therefore a great wide receiver in fantasy. Because if you look at their options, Darnell Mooney is still affected by injury. Kyle Pitts, we know the story on him. We don't know when he breaks out, if ever. So with Drake London, he's going to get so much work in this offense because he's their only real legitimate threat besides Bijan Robinson. Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, they ended up moving up because of a player we will go through here in a minute. These two quarterbacks, I think, are just pretty bulletproof unless one of them gets hurt. Now, I have seen it floated in the community, and I don't like this, by the way. I never want to hear it again. Josh Allen getting hurt would be against basically his entire career. Like, this guy has not been hurt and missed action basically his entire career. And I don't want to hear this conversation now. We don't want to have it again. Because Josh Allen is the only guy I view as bust-proof, knock on wood, in fantasy football. And Lamar Jackson, just the only reason he's always going to get ranked below Josh for me is because he's not as injury-proof. I mean, Lamar Jackson has been hurt and has missed a lot of time in multiple seasons. So Lamar Jackson, obviously the upside is right there. If he finishes a full 17 games, he 100% can be the better fantasy quarterback. But I just see a little bit more issues with Lamar than I do with Josh. But obviously they're both in the same tier. They're back-to-back in my rankings for a reason. Take your pick on this one. Trey McBride at 24, Jackson Smith and Jigba at 25. Trey McBride, again, was a beneficiary of A.J. Brown, who we will discuss here in a little bit. Trey McBride, I do view as a very, very worthy tight end swing in your first 2 to 3 rounds as well. I think Trey McBride will potentially continue to lead the team in targets in Arizona, not because Marvin isn't good. I still do believe in the talent that Marvin is. It's all because of the fact that Marvin Harrison Jr. is not in an offense that's friendly for him. I don't think this offensive coordinator is great. And I do think that Trey McBride is just a beneficiary of a quarterback who I think trusts the tight end position a lot. So I think Trey McBride is going to continue to get 130, 140 plus targets in this offense. It just all comes down to whether he gets in the end zone or not this year, which I predict he will more than he did last year. And then Jackson Smith-Njigba rose up 3 spots for me because I have concerns about A.J. Brown. A.J. Brown, I discussed on the video from yesterday, my rankings changes, that I do not trust. This situation with A.J. Brown being maybe just the hammy. I think this hamstring injury with A.J. Brown is concerning. And I do think that Jackson Smith-Njigba, it take a lot from me to move him above A.J. Brown, but I had to do it because A.J. Brown, I do worry about this whole scenario. This guy injured his hammy several weeks ago. Hasn't practiced since. Moving gingerly in his warm-ups. He's not even at full speed yet. This team is playing a game, the first game of the year, on Thursday night in just a couple weeks. And A.J. Brown has quietly been unhappy with this team reportedly for basically like almost the last year. So I kind of wonder if something deeper is going on below the surface that we just are not privy to. And that does make me worry, and that's the reason I had to move him down. Amari and Hampton at 27 and James Cook at 28. Now, Hampton did move down a spot for me. Don't read into this too much. I still am ready to commit to Amari and Hampton. And I think this is still basically above his ADP in drafts. So again, it's also important to know that you shouldn't be drafting these guys in order of my rankings. You need to play the draft game. Don't severely overdraft Josh Jacobs, for example, because I've got him so high. Well, the same goes for Hampton. Maybe a couple spots early if you really want him. But Hampton, for me, I'm ready to commit. The offensive line, I think, is still really good without Rashawn Slater, but it's a big loss. But I do also just believe in the talent. I love this guy. I love the team. I love the situation he's in. I think Amari and Hampton's great. James Cook did move back above Bucky Irving for me to round out this tier because I just believe in James Cook and his role in this offense more than I believe in Bucky's. And that's not a slight to Bucky. But with James Cook, there's just a really big workload that I think he will continue to get in the backfield in the red zone. I do think that it's hard to replicate a 16 touchdown season, and I'm not expecting that. But what I am expecting from James Cook is to continue to get work at the red zone and at the goal line. They signed this guy. They committed to him as their running back. So I do believe they obviously want to continue to fulfill the same role that he has been fulfilling for the past several years. And in an offense like Buffalo's, that upside is just too big to ignore. And then with Bucky Irving at 29, moving down 2 spots again, because James Cook moved above him. And I just think that when you look at this offensive coordinator, I cannot get it out of my head that he has discussed Rachaad White as one of the best, if not the best, receiving running backs in the entire league. I can't get that out of my head. So even though Rachaad White is injured right now, and I understand that, Bucky Irving will have to stay down here at 29 for now because I just don't trust it until I see it. And maybe it's a huge oversight. I will give you that. I will give you the fact that I could be very wrong about this one, but that's what I have, what I got right and what I got wrong during the fantasy season. Dropping down to our next tier, T. Higgins at 30, Kenneth Walker at 31. Now, again, there wasn't really much change with these two guys, so I'll make it quick. T. Higgins, I do believe, just has a lot of upside, but I don't like his draft price too much. And then Kenneth Walker, the reason he's above George Kittle and Jalen Hurts is because I simply believe that this guy, if healthy, has top 5 upside. Bottom line, I've discussed this a bunch. Clint Kubiak's offense is perfect for Kenneth Walker. They want to use him. So it's just a matter of can he stay healthy or not. And I understand if you don't believe that he can. I just am choosing to go all in on Kenneth Walker this year. And then again, George Kittle, Jalen Hurts, 32 and 33. These are two guys that I think represent the early quarterback / early tight end strategy that I really like. If you don't have access to Josh Allen, to Lamar Jackson, to Brock Bowers, to Trey McBride in the first 2 rounds, these guys are great to get in the 3rd round. George Kittle, I think, is just too important in this 49ers offense. This guy is going to be targeted like crazy. Again, the only concern is age and injury factor. But again, this guy, if healthy, is going to be a great fantasy asset because they can't afford to not use him because there's so many injuries. And then Jalen Hurts, I've consistently stated I do prefer him over Jaden Daniels because I think that Jalen Hurts, with the tush push still legal, and I think he'll throw more because of Saquon losing volume. I think Jalen Hurts has a better fantasy season than he did last year, and I'm really confident on that one. Now, TreVeyon Henderson moved up 6 spots to round out this tier at 34. With TreVeyon Henderson, this is flat out a running back that I think is getting closer to his ceiling, but I don't think we've reached it quite yet. I'm still willing to take him at the back of the 3rd round if he does rise to that level, because I think that he has that kind of upside. But I will say this. I hate to be the wet blanket on this, but I do think we're getting dangerously close to what his upside is as a community in fantasy. This guy still does play for an offense that we really don't know if they'll be any good. They will be better than last year. It's hard to be worse. Like, that offense was so bad. But at the same time, this offensive line still needs another year. They're still a work in progress. And this is an offense led by Josh McDaniels as the offensive coordinator. Don't forget those things. So I think we're getting close to the ceiling. We're not there yet, but I think this is probably my max on TreVeyon Henderson, just to let everybody know. Dropping down to our next tier, Jaden Daniels at 35, Ladd McConkey at 36. With Jaden Daniels, this is a quarterback that still is great. I am not trying to doubt him by putting Jalen Hurts above Jaden Daniels. I think Jaden Daniels will be great. I mean, you watch him in the preseason game, he was excellent in his lone action. We know the guy is an elite player. But the problem I see is I just don't see the same level of weapons if Terry McLaurin isn't there. Now, there hasn't been much reason to suggest Terry won't be there, but I do think it's still an issue that this guy is not practicing, not playing with the team right now because he's older and his body needs to get ready through training camp, and he's not doing that right now. So I have problems with this lack of weaponry with Jaden Daniels, but I still think he will be great. And then Ladd did move down a spot because of the Keenan Allen situation. Not that I think Keenan will overtake him. I don't think that's possible. Ladd McConkey's just the superior player at this point. But Ladd is in a scenario where this quarterback does have very good chemistry with Keenan Allen. So there is a factor to this that will play a role into his upside just a little bit, but I'm not super concerned. Marvin Harrison Jr. at 37. Jalen Waddle ended up rising again to 38. This is a scenario where he stays at the same spot, and it's because of the fact that, again, the offense I don't believe is set up for him. I do believe in the talent, and I believe in the leap he will take as a talent, but I still have concerns with the offensive coordinator being able to maximize him. So Marvin I see just being better on a per-touch basis than he was in his rookie year, and that's what propels him up to this range right here. But with Jalen Waddle, I've discussed all offseason, I'm out on Tyreek Hill, and everybody who's been watching my rankings from the beginning understands this. But everybody who's coming back now because we're getting closer to fantasy has been asking me, where is Tyreek Hill? Where is Tyreek Hill in your rankings? You haven't seen him yet because I don't like him. I think Tyreek Hill, this situation is ugly, and I don't think it's getting any better. Jalen Waddle has quietly had a very good offseason. All you have to do is look this up in Miami. They have been talking about him having a really good offseason. His head's in the right place, and I think Waddle will just be the better wide receiver. Point blank, end of story in Miami. Joe Burrow moved up to 39, and Garrett Wilson did move up as well. Now, Joe Burrow moved up 6 spots because I have just an inherent distrust for the guys below him that he passed up in the same tier. So I don't think that there's anything to really talk about because we already know Joe Burrow's ceiling is great. But the one thing I will say with Burrow is I don't like his draft price. I'm not drafting him in the 3rd round. Even the 4th round, I think, is too early. 5th round, I'm comfortable, but these are really early spots that you have to get him in redraft leagues. But he is above all these other players because I just don't trust Garrett Wilson, for example, to be better than Joe Burrow in fantasy. Garrett Wilson, the only reason he moved up is because of the Rashee Rice situation, and I trust him more than Breece Hall, who we'll talk about here in a minute. This Rashee Rice situation is just not very good. And this is a Rashee Rice guy that you're talking to right here because I love Rashee Rice. But he had to move down for me 5 spots because of this suspension situation. We don't know if he's getting suspended before the season, during the season, in 2026. We have no freaking idea. Well, all we know is that there is a hearing scheduled for late September. So I would assume it's going to be this year. I still believe it's going to be 4 games. That's what I'm going to stick to unless proven wrong. But Rashee Rice, if it's a season interrupted, it makes me really off of this one because I don't like the idea of a player playing the first 4 games, getting suspended for another 4, and then coming back off of that suspension and expecting him to be the same player he was before he left off. I just don't like this situation. I need clarity on this one to move him back up in the rankings. And honestly, he might move down a little bit further. Now, Breece Hall at 42 did drop 4 spots. And I've been discussing this all offseason. This idea of this 2-headed, 3-headed running back monster, it's come to fruition. We've seen it through the first 2 preseason games. So Breece Hall has to drop. But the one thing I will say with Breece is that I do still believe in the talent that Breece Hall is over a guy like Chuba Hubbard, who dropped 4 spots. Now, Chuba is just a player that I think hit his ceiling last year. It's not because I don't like him. I think he will be a solid pick in fantasy drafts this year. I just don't really trust that this Carolina offense provides him much more upside than he got last year. And especially if Rico Dowdle takes over on third downs. That's going to be a concern because Chuba's not a pass catcher. Rico Dowdle is. And that's a definite concern that you can have as a Chuba owner at this point because it does look like they might want to use that approach with Chuba. Alvin Kamara at 44, Mike Evans at 45. Alvin Kamara up 3 spots. And it's because I just love the upside if he's able to stay healthy. But I also, again, I've been talking about this all offseason too. I mean, the likelihood that he does get hurt is just like kind of high. Like the guy is in his 30s now and he's been injured before and this whole team rides on him. Like this whole offense will ride on Alvin Kamara. I do believe in Kellen Moore as an offensive mind, but at the same time, I know that this offense just can't move without Alvin Kamara. So everything rides on this guy. Make no mistake about this one. And then Mike Evans at 45. With Egbuka, I do have concerns with that pick still regarding Mike Evans, but I do think it's more of a Chris Godwin injury situation. That is the reason for the Emeka Egbuka pick looking back on it. Jalen McMillan, he's already better than him. So Mike Evans, I do still believe, is in a similar situation to like a Derrick Henry, for example, where if he ends up being the same player as last year, he's going to outperform this ranking that I've given him at 45. But I do still think that there is cause for some concern because of the age history and the history with wide receivers who fall off a cliff, usually at his age range. Now, dropping down to our next tier right here, I've got DeAndre Swift at 46, Devontae Adams at 47. Swift moved up for me because he's going to continue to move up in all likelihood because I just trust DeAndre Swift's situation, unlike I trust a lot of other players. This situation with Ben Johnson at offensive coordinator / head coach with a better offensive line by far than last year, I don't see how it doesn't freaking work. This is a great offensive mind in the running game. DeAndre Swift, not a great player. Ben Johnson, great coach. He will make DeAndre Swift look better than he is, which is why he's at 46. Devontae Adams at 47. This is a player that I just think had to drop a little bit because of this Matt Stafford injury. And again, it's been a good week for Matt Stafford. But the problem with Stafford is that we don't know what tomorrow looks like or the next day looks like with Stafford. We have no idea. So I do think that it's worth noting with Devontae Adams that this definitely rides on Matt Stafford's health, especially with an older wide receiver here who has not liked playing with Jimmy Garoppolo in the past, which, by the way, is the primary backup for the Los Angeles Rams. Not Stetson Bennett. You could take that one to the bank. Xavier Worthy at 48 and Terry McLaurin at 49. Worthy moved down a couple spots, not because I don't think he's going to be good. I think Worthy will be a really good pick because I do think that regardless of whether Rashee Rice is there or not, I think his role looks like it could increase from last year. I do think that when you looked at the first preseason game with Xavier Worthy, they are using him more down the field, which is how they should have used him last year, but they didn't. So I think that Worthy, without Rashee Rice, is potentially a top 10 receiver. But I think with Rashee Rice, is probably around that wide receiver 20, wide receiver 22 range for me. And that's where he's going to stand right now in the overall rankings too. Terry McLaurin at 49, I think is just in a situation that I've described as not good. And I think it's not getting any better. Like this team has reportedly been a little closer, not been closer. We have no idea. Apparently, he just wants more money than they're willing to offer him. If he does play, I do still see having good games because he does have Jaden Daniels at quarterback. But make no mistake, I've discussed this all offseason with Terry. I want him to practice because his body needs to get ready. Because what happens with older players is they don't practice, and then they end up getting a soft tissue injury because their body was not ready to play. That's what he's missing right now, and that's the problem I have with him. Zay Flowers at 50, Ted McMillan at 51. Zay Flowers, I love Zay this year. I'm way above consensus on him, and I kind of love reading the comments when I do this because everybody always thinks of like, you can't tell me that you'd rather take him over Tyreek Hill. Well, yes, I can sit here and tell you into the camera that I would rather take Zay Flowers than Tyreek Hill. Zay Flowers fits breakout research that I've done for many, many years. He's on a contract year theoretically, and I do think that Zay Flowers, when you read the tea leaves with the offensive coordinator and Todd Monken, they want to get him the ball more. He's a player on the rise. Tyreek is not. Ted McMillan is also a player I think is on the rise for me as well. I did not love the prospect. I will say that right out of the gate. I also don't love Bryce for fantasy purposes, but I do think that Bryce is good enough and will be good enough to supply a decent wide receiver 1 in Carolina. I think he'll be a solid wide receiver 2. I did like him in preseason action, and I've liked reports that I've been seeing out of Carolina on Tet. So he did move up a couple spots over Cortland Sutton, who moved down 1 spot. Sutton, it's not because I don't believe in him all of a sudden. We know what Sutton is. He's the number 1 wide receiver for Bo Nix, who will take a leap at quarterback in a Denver offense that I think is going to be awesome this year. So Sutton, I do think, is still a really good player, who I might be undervaluing, to be completely honest with you. Dropping down to our next tier, James Conner at 53, RJ Harvey at 54. Now, James Conner moved down because of the fact that Tet moved up, not because I don't think that James Conner won't be good when he's playing. James Conner, though, has a problem, and I've said this all offseason. This is why I have planted my flag on Trey Benson, because Trey Benson sat with the starters along with James Conner just in their last preseason game. That means that they view this guy truly as the 1B to the 1A James Conner. And you know what that means and what I've said all offseason, which is James Conner is in imminent danger of losing his spot. Because A, he will either get injured, and if Trey Benson performs, they will make that switch. Or B, James Conner just loses a step and Trey Benson just comes in and is the better player. Either one's possible, but I think either one happens. So James Conner has a better first half of the year than he does in the second half, but that's why he's able to stay at top 53, because I think his first half will be strong. And with RJ Harvey, I'm still going to keep him here at 54, which I had him at last time, because I think that the preseason indicated some positive things for us. We got an indication that this guy is a first and second down back with the starting offense, and that JK is the third down back. And I don't think that that will really end up hurting him too much if that will be the case during the regular season. The bottom line is I want a running back on this Denver offense. It's the number 2 offensive line in 2025, according to PFF. So I want in on this Denver offense, and I'm pretty much ready to commit to RJ Harvey being that running back. Travis Hunter at 55, Debo at 56. Travis Hunter, same spot. I think he's going to get 100-plus targets in an offense that I don't trust the quarterback, but I also think that Travis Hunter is so dominant as an athlete that he's going to make the most out of every touch that he gets in this offense. Debo Samuel moved up a spot for me at 56 because I believe in the player. There is no metrics to back this up. Don't ask me for them. They do not exist. His last year was incredibly awful, but I think a new fresh start on a contract year with an offense that is very well run by Cliff Kingsbury opens up possibilities for him. And you saw some explosion that he once had in that preseason game last week where he broke off a run for 19 yards. He still has it, guys. I believe in Debo this year, and I have all offseason. DJ Moore at 57, Devonta Smith at 58 rose up, and Isaiah Pacheco at 59. DJ Moore rose up a little bit only because I like what we saw from Caleb. I'm still not big on Caleb. I do still think it could go bad, and I do think that DJ Moore, the same thing concerns me that has concerned me all offseason, which is that if you look back with Caleb, he does not have dominant number 1 wide receivers. It's just a fact throughout his entire history of being quarterback at college and pro level. So I think that he still does have that disadvantage, but I also think that he's still the best option. And if it does work for the offense, he will still be a top 60 player. Now with Devonta Smith at 58, I just kind of had to come to the realization that if I was going to say that Jalen Hurts was going to throw more this year, I had to move up Devonta Smith, especially with this A.J. Brown fiasco that's happening right now. Devonta Smith will get more work. Now he's also dealing with an injury apparently, so it could go a little bit bad, but I don't see it going bad for an entire season. Devonta Smith will be a good player because he is a good player, and I believe that this offense throws more. And then Pacheco to round out this tier. I just still can't get on board, and I know I should, because this offense will provide a good running back. I just don't know who it will be because I just can't believe what I saw last year with Isaiah Pacheco and how bad he looked after the injury. I get it. We're almost a year removed from the injury, and he could be really good. It's a contract year for him as well, but I think Pacheco is just a player that I want to see before I invest in him, which is going to be unfortunate because if he hits, he's going to hit really big, and I won't have much of him because I haven't drafted much of him. Dropping down to our last tier, big tier right here, Tyrone Tracy Jr. at 60, Aaron Jones at 61. Tyrone Tracy Jr. is another flag plant guy for me. I believe they will use him, and he has fit the unsuspecting league-winning running backs criteria to a T. I like this situation. He was really good last year on an efficiency per touch metric, and I do think that everybody overlooks the fact that he was a college wide receiver, and they always point to Cam Skattebo as a great receiving back. Tyrone Tracy is better than Cam Skattebo at receiving. He just is. So Tyrone Tracy Jr., I just see being the guy in this offense right here. I think Cam Skattebo's a good player, but I think Tyrone Tracy's the better player. Aaron Jones is 61. Not much movement for him. He has always been here in my rankings just because of the fact that I do believe that he's going to relinquish work to Jordan Mason while also still be really efficient on a per-touch basis. But I also don't think he gets more than 15 touches per game. So I think that he's efficient on all those 15, but I do think that that's his cap here. With Bo Nix, this is my number 6 quarterback in fantasy football this year. I love him. I think that he is undervalued in fantasy drafts this year. This offense, as I said earlier, I don't see a way it doesn't work. They've improved weapons-wise. Their offensive line looks great. He's got Sean Payton. Find me faulting it. I think Bo Nix is going to be really good in fantasy this year. And Khalil Shakir, I know I'm way above consensus on Khalil Shakir. It comes down to a simple fact that I want a wide receiver attached to Josh Allen. And I think Khalil Shakir, at the end of the day, will be that guy. They just signed him to be their guy. They made no receiver moves during the offseason. They're essentially just waiting on a breakout for Keon Coleman or Dalton Kincaid or both. But we know that neither of these guys have really shown that they can do that. So I think that this comes down to Mike Tyson's quote. Everybody's got to play until they get punched in the face. And I think Khalil Shakir steps in whenever that plan falls apart because he's the guy that we know can handle 100-plus targets in this offense. DK Metcalf at 64, Jameson Williams at 65. DK Metcalf, I just don't really believe that this is the offense that's going to be great. But I also think he's a better player than George Pickens by a little bit. So I think that he's going to get peppered with targets. Aaron Rodgers will be good enough to supply him really good games, but I also think he will disappear a lot. So this one just will be boom or bust. I think it's a better best ball play than a redraft play. I don't suggest drafting him in redraft leagues. Jameson Williams is 65. He did move down just because of the fact that I had to move up Devonta Smith over him. And I also believe that, like I said all offseason, this will be the big three in this offense. Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jahmyr Gibbs, and Sam Laporta. I think Jameson Williams is going to be the odd man out in an offense led by John Morton, who I don't see maximizing all of his players to that same ability. Now, Jameson Williams, there's been a lot of positive reports on him all offseason. It could be really good for him, so I might be really wrong on this one, but it's not because I hate him. I think he's at 65 because I still respect the player. I just don't really believe in John Morton being able to maximize him like Ben Johnson just did. Jaylen Warren at 66, Joe Mixon at 67. Jaylen Warren, I moved above him, and I moved above Caleb Johnson. And I discussed this on the Rankings Changes video the other day as well. I just think Jaylen Warren is going to be the starting back, plain and simple, and you should too, because that's all they've shown you throughout the entire offseason and the preseason. So Jaylen Warren, I just believe, is the starting running back for Pittsburgh, and I think that when you fit him in to my unsuspecting league-winning running backs criteria, he fits like a glove. So you have to factor that in because that's what led me to Chuba last year. He's got a shot at doing it, and I trust my model, and that's why he's here at 66. And I moved him over Joe Mixon because Joe Mixon I discussed on the video as well, being a drop for me because of the fact that Joe Mixon, just as a player, I already had questions on before this injury became really, really bad. I mean, we don't even know if he's going to play in week 1. Report came out that he might start the year on the NFI list. That's bad. So I don't trust Joe Mixon at all. I do see this one going really, really wrong. George Pickens at 68 and Tyreek Hill at 69. Now, George Pickens at 68, I'll be honest here, I did a little finagling to make Tyreek Hill 69. Honestly, I do think Tyreek Hill is a better fantasy player than Pickens this year. But I will say that I don't like either one of these guys. I've been out on both these guys all offseason, and it shouldn't come as a surprise. Pickens, I believe, has the opportunity, and I believe in the talent. I want to see him as a Steelers fan succeed outside of Pittsburgh, but there's a lot of history that suggests he will not. All the history of recent years of like the last 6 or 7 wide receivers who have left Pittsburgh is awful. And if you think that Pickens is any different, I would challenge that. So Pickens is just in the same category as Tyreek, where they're just being drafted way above my own personal rankings. I still see them being viable fantasy players, but neither of them I would ever draft because they're just being drafted several rounds above where I would actually take them. Tyreek Hill is the same deal. I think Tyreek Hill, this is the first time you've really heard me talk about him and where his ranking is all offseason. So I'll say this. I think Tyreek Hill will still be involved enough to be a top 70 player. Like, I do believe that. But I don't see him being the same level of player that we saw last year because all the research I've done, and I should go into this on a different video, Tyreek Hill will be in a spot this year where if he finishes a top 12 wide receiver again, which is where he's being drafted, it would be breaking history and it would be rewriting history. Having a wide receiver go on 2 different consecutive top 12 runs and coming back for a third time, it has never happened, so I don't see it happening. And I actually think that it's going to be worse than that, and that's why I've got him here in this range of rankings. So let me know what you think of the big rankings list in the comments below. And if you want to see the top 12 kicker rankings for 2025 fantasy football, click on this video right here.